Hello, hello. Welcome to Heart of the Tribe. My name is Shel Wagner. I'm so glad that you came to join us today. Whether you're able to join live or you watch this presentation in the future, we pray that it will be a blessing for your life. So I've got a really great interview scheduled for today. Teresa Ojinma is a kinesiologist and essential somatics movement teacher that I've been working with since our interview on January 29th of 2024. If you look in the description box, you'll have a link to that interview. So that if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. It was a great interview. So Teresa is the owner of Home Fitness Plus in Abbotsford, British Columbia in Canada, serving in her community as a clinical exercise physiologist, kinesiologist, and essential somatics movement teacher with a mission to empower people through love, relationship, connection, education, application, and practice to know and understand the responsibility we have as human beings to gain a greater self-awareness that leads to transformation, restoration, healing, freedom, and success in all areas of life. Teresa has a wonderful story of her own journey to health, from getting her thoughts in line with the truth of Yah's word and allowing the Holy Spirit to guide her to just what she needed when she needed it, learning to let go of mindsets that were a hindrance to her healing, along with the testimony of the faithfulness of the body of Messiah to be his hands and feet of love. All who take time to listen to Teresa's story will certainly come away blessed, hopeful, and empowered to face the giants in their own lives. So I've got her website in the description. It is www.homefitnessplus.ca. And Teresa has been working with another colleague of ours. Nicole Kallstrom is a world champion barrel racer who I also interviewed on September 27th of 2023. And I have a link to that interview in the description box as well. That was another one of my favorite interviews. I'm so glad to have them both together on the show. Her website is www.honorinhorses.com, which is also in the description. And she shares many videos and blogs about her experiences. She's got a great gallery of pictures. I love the gallery. It's a beautiful website. So Nicole is wife to an amazing husband, Uriah, a mama to a beautiful daughter, Kadima, who is just over and 7 mares, plus 7 mares. Not sure how many mares she has at this point. She is a past world record holder in barrel racing, riding instructor. She's a clinician and lifelong learner with a heart full of joy in our Heavenly Father. Teresa and Nicole have been collaborating on many healing adventures for clients, both human and equestrian. I can hardly wait to hear about their adventures and discoveries. So, one of the things that I wanted to share, what fascinated me and why I really wanted to do this interview with these two ladies, is both of my guests, they have a way of looking at life that is different. It's full of possibility and hope. The value of their vantage point and the way that they both choose to see the challenge of a situation and then investigate it for a solution without stress or striving, it inspires me. And I'm learning from them in the philosophy of a different way of living. So I wanted to share something with you from one of Nicole's blog posts before I bring my guest on. She had written a blog post called Setting Things Down. It's on her website. It says, during the first clinic I attended with Pippa Callanan, an exquisite teacher of horsemanship and French classical dressage, she handed out a worksheet called Developing Symmetry Through Asymmetry Movements. It was a simple table, 9 rows long, 3 columns wide, and was supposed to have something to do with writing. I looked at it and my eyes went cross, and I thought it might be in French. But upon further investigation, it wasn't. That didn't matter, though, because I still had not a clue what it meant. Pippa explained it further, and while I'm sure what she was saying made complete sense, it was still over my head. Instead of being determined to figure it out, I said to myself, one day I'm going to take a look at this, and I'm going to know exactly what this means. As I folded it up and tucked it away in my notebook. This was October 2022. I've come across it a handful of times since then, picked it up, taken a look, folded it back, and said, still nothing. It happened again this week, except this time when I opened it up, I knew exactly what it meant. Gosh, it was so simple. I almost forgot how utterly confusing it was to me all the times prior that I've looked at it. It was a good lesson for me to remember. Some things ought to be sought out with intensity, but sometimes it's better to rest in the not knowing and trusting that the knowledge will come in due time. Had I stressed to figure it out at the time I first saw it, it wouldn't have done me much good, even if I did understand, as I had none of the finesse to properly execute it at that time. It also was sweet evidence of the progress I've made over the past year and a half since meeting Pippa. I'm beyond grateful for the gifts that setting it down gave. I loved that. You know, Carrie Brown and I, one of my ministry partners, she and I've talked a lot about learning how to live instead of constant striving, but to live in the moment and be appreciative of every moment, enjoying the journey. And to me, that really talked about that. So the man in the arena was another one that I really would recommend that you read from Nicole's site. It's also a really interesting blog that I enjoyed. So I just want to recommend, if you're going to check out her site, go read that blog. It's another really interesting one. So I also have had the privilege of working with Teresa one-on-one. I've been so grateful for the work that we've done together. And often she coaches me by reminding me to listen to what my body is saying and notice it, right? And she'll say, notice it, notice what your body's doing, notice it. As a trauma overcomer, you know, I've shared a lot on my channel about the different challenges I've had. I used to call myself a trauma victim. Then I moved into calling myself a trauma survivor. But now I don't even see it that way at all. I see myself as an overcomer. I've overcome and continue to overcome. But when you live in a destructive pattern for a very long time of freeze, fight, or flight, being in tune with this flesh suit is not a first thought process without extensive practice. So that's what Teresa's been really helping me with is it's okay to be in my body and experience what my body is doing and saying and become more aware of it and become comfortable with it. You know, it's what I'm learning is just invaluable. So I know both of these ladies from our association with Dr. Alfonso Manzo's clinic in Medina, Ohio, called Wellbeing by Design. I'm privileged to know many of the staff and students at the clinic, and I find this philosophy of healing energetically, naturally, and working with what Yahweh put in place already very freeing, right? Having the understanding that our emotions impact our physical bodies, whether human or animal, and having a compassionate way to help ourselves and others is revolutionary in the body of Yahusha. I'm so grateful for the work of Kim Kubica and Davian Moss and the work they've put into the Pathways Plus program. It's a demonstration of the work of Yahusha coming to set the captives free. All right. So with that, I am going to go ahead and bring on my guest. But before I do want you to realize that we are not doctors. We are not giving medical advice. We are discussing things that we have learned. If you are seeking medical advice, we encourage you to go seek your own doctor. So there's our medical disclaimer. All right. Okay, so with that, I'm going to bring on our guest. Welcome, Teresa. Good to have you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here.
All right, and let's welcome Nicole. Nicole, welcome.
Hello.
So good to have you both here. And what a privilege to have you both at once.
Yeah.
So,
really fun.
Yeah. So I had been working with Teresa in a somatic session for myself, and at the end of it, she started sharing with me some of the things how you guys were connecting and beginning to collaborate some. And so, Nicole, I want to start with you. Can you begin to tell me how you connected with Teresa and what prompted you to seek out her services?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when it was, but she had an interview and I had listened to it and thought, wow, that, she had a lot of great things to say. And I just felt, I guess, a connection, or I don't know what, but, it was like, okay, I like her. I need to, study her out. So I went to her website and looked around. I thought, this looks really great. I think a lot of this is applicable to me. It's in areas that I've been wanting to work on within my body. So I had a phone call with her, and then I started to try and plan things out. And I was like overwhelmed. This is too much. I can't take on another thing right now. So I reached out to her and said, I definitely want to do this, but I need to finish up a couple things. And so in a few months, when I'm my plate is lighter, then I will reach back out to you. And I don't know, it was probably only a couple weeks to a month. And I'm really trying to discern the voice of Yah and stuff. I don't want to, and intuition and all the things and how they align. So I'll call it a prompting, it was probably from Yah. And it was just like, you can't delay this. You need this now, because I have a dream and a goal of going to the National Finals Rodeo in 2025. So I've really started ramping up my training, putting this vision down. And so, yeah, I felt like, okay, I need to do this now. I'll make time. So I reached back out to Teresa, and she was so sweet that we found out, we're in the same time zone. So, 6:30 bright and early in the morning, she was game to do our sessions, which is perfect because my daughter is still sleeping. My husband could take over until, he goes to work. So anyway, so we started on it, and, I know I really enjoyed the first couple. I think it was between session 2 and 3, I started to talk with her about one of my horses in particular, Birdie, who has some, which now I'm recognizing it's the same as mine. I think I carry all my horses, or they carry mine. I'm not sure which, but kind of right in here in the shoulder, it's super tight, and it pulls her arm all the way out to where it'll just deform. And I can tell that it's worse when she's stressed out or doesn't feel safe. It'll get really bulldoggy. If she feels safe and stuff, sometimes it looks completely normal. So I started to realize hey, I could apply this to her. And I started kind of pitching the idea to Teresa, and she would give me some ideas. And so, yeah, I just started playing with it. And I think by session 4 or 5, I all of a sudden really felt like I got it. I got the idea and what we were working with. And from there, I was really able to feel out my own horses and kind of know what to try and what to play with. And the results were immediate. I mean, it was just whoa, I had a lame horse 5 minutes ago and now she's sound. And I did a few little stretches, or not stretches, but a few little movements, and, and it just released whatever needed to be released, and she was better. So that was kind of how my journey to Teresa started, and then into the horses.
That is fascinating. So, Teresa, what was your response for working with the horses with somatics movement?
Well, when Nicole told me about her mare and what was happening in her shoulders, immediately I told her, I said, we can't speak to the horse and the horse understanding us verbally like we do in somatics. We give verbal cues, but you could manually take her into that pendiculation and guide her back out. And she was like, really? I said, yeah. So I talked to her a bit about going with the horse's resistance, the way we do in somatics. So where we're holding our tension, where those patterns are tight, we go into the resistance. We go into the contraction that's already there. That's the first phase of the pendiculation. And then we mindfully, on our own, when we're doing it, we're mindfully releasing and lengthening And then the third phase is a complete relaxation. So immediately my mind went to, okay, Moshe Feldenkrais teaches functional integration and it's hands-on. So he provided the hands-on support or more sensory feedback for a client. But I'm like, well, you'll probably do this with an animal. So guide the horse into the pendiculation and then slowly guide the horse back out, and then allow her, kind of like pet her along that muscle belly, and just for the relaxation part, and just let her rest and see if that will release it. Another term that Moshe used was kinetic mirroring, which is if you do the work for the muscle ceases to do its own work. So this is how we can help, or at least I'm not sure if anyone else has done this with animals. I'm transferring what I know to, okay, we could probably do this with animals. So if we take the animal into that contraction, we'll relax that muscle for that animal. The kinetic mirroring, if we take the origin and insertion and bring the two together, that muscle will cease doing work. So it'll cease contracting in that way. And then we can guide the animal back out. And then same with people, we guide ourselves back out consciously. Or if we're helping, because there is another stream of somatics, which is the CSE, Clinical Somatic Educator, which they use the hands-on, they use the functional integration, and they do use, obviously it's more clinical, so there's a lot of hands-on guiding the client into the pendiculation and then guiding them back out. So that's where I thought about, and I'm like, try this. So, yeah. And then when she came back to me, I was just like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. So there is, I came across Moshe Feldenkrais before I knew you through a gal named Linda Tellington, and she studied under him and applied it to horses and dogs and stuff. And it's called, I think hers, it's called like T-touch therapy. My neighbor actually like lent me the book, was like, I think you might like this. And then I was like, oh, I want to go to who she learned from. So then I got his books, and then I came across you and you were talking about him, and I'm like, wow. But anyway, so what I found really interesting, once I got confident, it was like, I tried it after I talked with you, and I kind of did some stuff, but I didn't really know what I was doing or like what the goal really was. So I don't know if it did much. But once after a few sessions more with you, I got confident and I started working with my horses, and really being present with them and feeling their body. Most of the time, different things happen. Sometimes they would really push into it. Like I would guide their leg and then they would like push where they wanted it, And so sometimes I was like, okay, maybe that's the limit. Like, and I kind of would like go right to the point where they'd want to push, and then I'd guide them back, because I was like, it's not really like a stretch, And then sometimes I would go with them and say, like, if this really feels good to you, like, I'm going to follow you there, and kind of do it in a way where I'm still guiding what I'm wanting to guide. And, there's this one on my mare Rocky that I bring her hoof, like her front leg, back under her belly. And because right in this area is really tight, and her here is really tight from a hind end weakness. And so I'm really like wanting to loosen that up, and I'll guide it under. And if I go too far, she'll like fall down. Like, she's like, I can't, and I'm like, oops, sorry. That was the limit. But, it's just so interesting as I'm guiding them, feeling where they want to take their body. Mm-hmm. And that's where I feel like that's really cool, because I'm more of just a facilitator for them. And then I just kind of follow. And when we do that, it's really cool to see where their body's leading them. And then you can kind of get a better understanding of what's going on, like actually. And I wish I had these videos. I didn't get them, but we took some before and after videos when I was working with Pippa. My riding instructor that Shell mentioned in the beginning was here. And so we took somatics in the morning together. It was her first somatic session, and she really loved it, really connected with it. And I knew she would. That's why I was like, come do somatics with me. But anyway, so we had the whole day to ride, which was super awesome. So we were playing with a bunch of different stuff. And so she would take videos because she was like, you know, after you release, they lick their lips, but they would actually carry it all the way down through their tail. So they'd release and it'd go through and the tail would release. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that to her was a big like moment, because when she's doing a lot of riding, she rides very somatically, if that's, you know, even a thing. Mm-hmm. But she rides with an awareness of, you know, notice what the body is saying. Like, that's how Pippa rides. That's how she teaches. You're noticing the horse. You're doing it for the horse. So anyway, so that tail release is very meaningful to her. She's very familiar with that. So as I was doing the different somatic movements, and she's like, and out the tail, there it is, you know, that is really the big release. So it's so fun. It's so fun to learn and be able to grasp something. I'm nowhere near studied in somatics, but I feel like this is where truth comes in. When you grab something that like when you grab truth, it might take a little bit of time to get it like clear, but once it's there, like, you don't really need education in truth. Like, it's already built into you, you know? So it's like, once you kind of get the little like things, you know, straightened out, then I can take it and I can work on my horses on the fly. Like, I don't know, I'm not educated, but I know how to be present and to feel them out. And I understand the truth concept, the foundational concept of going into resistance, you know, and relaxation, all of those things. So I just love that, you know. So, and Pippa was too, you know, we were laughing throughout the whole lesson because we connect on that truth thing. And we're like, oh, there's truth, you know, oh, there it is again, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah. My somatics mentor always said, the truth is more meaningful when we come to it on our own.
Yeah.
And that is so true. Mm-hmm. You know, and when we get inside ourselves in that somatic experiencing, and we get to know, okay, where are we holding? And in this case, it's like, where's the horse holding? Mm-hmm. And you can sense it. When you put your hands on the horse, you're sensing it. You're now connecting with their energy, and you're sensing, where are they holding this tension? And it was interesting that you said, you know, they would come to the point where, you know, they're lengthening out it's like the phase 2 of the pendiculation, where you're lengthening, you're releasing, you're lengthening the muscle back to its resting length. The horse is finding its neutral or its resting length, its zero position, coming back to homeostasis or balance. Which is like, it fits into everything we're doing, you know, also with ATB, right? Yeah. It's helping the body get back to homeostasis, get back into balance, because that's where we function best, right?
Yeah.
And we're created that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with my mare, Shasta, she had been off for a tendon injury for quite a few months. I just kind of let her heal, you know, on her own. And so I pulled her out of the pasture and said, well, let's just see how she's doing, because it's been enough time. And she was a little bit off. And so I said, well, why don't I just do some somatics? So Pippa says, okay, let me take a video of you for data, you know, and then we'll stop, hop off. I did some somatics around that tendon, which this was kind of like a knee tendon. It was her hock, it was her back leg, and she tore the front of it, which is kind of an unusual spot. But anyway, so I started to work with her where we went into the resistance, held it up there a little bit, and then let her release it, and then release. And then eventually I would take her the other way. So like I said, it wasn't more than 5 minutes, if it was even that, you know. And I hopped back on, and Pippa's like, you have a different horse, you know. But it makes sense to me because, you know, she's been injured, or had this injury for 8 months or so, and probably maybe even before that. And she's carried it, you know, a certain way for a long time. And so that motor muscle patterning has really been established for a long time. And so to me, it's like, well, it's not that the tendon's not healed. It's just that the muscle patterning needs to be changed. Mm-hmm. And so you can do that so fast, like with somatics, like otherwise this is what would have happened pre-somatic. Well, maybe not, because I have ATB and all that stuff. So I would have actually gone that route. But, but like pre ATB, the general idea or answer is that I load up, I drive 5 more hours to go to my vet. We ultrasound again, we x-ray, they would suggest injections. I don't do any of that stuff anyway, but the general, route, that's what you have to do. And so you're injecting, you're doing all this stuff. And eventually it does work, because injecting will at least numb the pain. And then maybe they can slowly start to recreate their patterning that way. But that's like, you're putting in all these toxic, we know all the reasons why that's not a good idea, but here we're in an arena and I'm just like, oh, let's teach that to, release. It's healed now. And 5 minutes later, she's like, oh, okay. Like, I'll take that any day over the alternative. It's really amazing. And
that is amazing.
Yeah. So I really wish I had the video. One day it'll come back.
Well, you know what hits me in all this, just, in the time period that we're in, and different things, are not, our mainstream solutions are not what they used to be. And yet Yah is providing these high level, kingdom level responses and solutions and answers that are so much simpler than all the stuff that we were poisoning ourselves with anyway.
Yeah.
Really amazing.
And it's just, I love this, because this to me connects the truth with the Discovering Mercy and Pathways Plus with Kim and the clinic, right? Like, it's the whole idea, and this connects with somatics. It's all the same, right? True. But it's like becoming more of who Yah created us to be, becoming more Nicole. Like, that's what I got out of Discovering Mercy and working with Kim. Like, I'm so much more me, and I'm pressing into the me. And I'm letting go of all the expectations or ideas that I think I need to be. And I'm doing the crazy, this is what Nicole's supposed to be doing stuff, and pushing into that, the resistance, right? Anyway, so with the horses, I feel like, that's all the same in the somatics. It's like, you're just learning how to be more human. You're just learning how to be more who you were created to be. Like, you're pushing into, how did Yah design us? You're pushing into, how does your body work? There's such this love and respect for who we are as a creation when you get into this knowledge. And I love that. It's not a fighting against, it's a leaning into and embracing, a living, it's just like, wow.
Yeah, this is the philosophy that I was talking about, that the more that I'm involved with, the people from Dr. Monzo's clinic, the different practitioners, my friendship with Kim, with Davey, with Nita, with you guys, all of it, it is opening my mind up. It's like a pressure release valve in and of itself, to where, which gives you so much freedom, because then if you're becoming more authentically you, and you're more comfortable in just who Yah created you to be, it matters so much less what other people think about that. Yeah. It's so freeing.
Yeah. And that authenticity is so attractive. And, we want to be around authentic people. That's just what we do, because that's how we connect, right? There's like almost this static. If you're around somebody, like myself included, if I'm dealing with other stuff and not really present, it creates this static electricity that I can't really fully connect with anybody. They can't really connect with me. And maybe they don't really know why, or I don't really know why, but like, it just doesn't happen. And when you don't have that, when you're just like here, it's a clear connection. It's like the best signal you can get. And I also love, and say this carefully, because I'm not discrediting going to Yah. You go to him in everything. I'm saying this with the recognition that he's the creator of all, and we do bring our things to him. But I feel like, before I would have prayed over her hawk and then gone to the vet probably, like, because, what else do you do? Or waited a long time. And I'm not discrediting the prayer again, but when I can really say, like, yeah, this is your creation, and I know you've designed her to heal and to move properly. How can I help her in that? And then I take it in my own hands and I help her in that, and I restore what Yah designed her to be. That, I think that's what we're supposed to do. Like, I think that's what life is. That's what living is. We're restoring what was created to be. It's not just saying, yeah, you do it, because I don't understand your creation. It's like, I am your creation.
Yes.
So yeah.
I'd like to speak to what happened to your horse there with regard to the injury, because it happens in humans as well. So when we have injury, illness, any other type of trauma, we go into these reflexive patterns that I talk about in somatics, the red light, green light, and trauma reflex. Or these are compensatory patterns as well. So imagine if there was a broken leg or, again, an injury, so that the horse, when it had that injury, it learned a different pattern of how to move while compensating for that injury. And that became now a motor memory, like that became a feedback loop. And that same thing happens in our bodies. So why is it so fast with somatics? Is because somatics is an education, and we're doing it through the somatic nervous system. That's why it's like you said, this is like instant. I could go to the doctor, I go here to here. No, this is where the power of somatics and knowing this education comes into play if ever you have an injury, because after the area is healed, we need to teach the central nervous system it's okay to move there. And that it needs to learn how to move through the range of motion that it had before without pain, to know, oh, yeah, I can move here again. I can do things on this limb again, or I can do things on this side of my body again. And that's where the power of somatics comes in with rehabilitation. When we're rehabilitating a limb, it's also good for, not just physiological, but psychological too, because we're bringing that awareness through the felt sense. And we, like you said, we're coming to truth. What is it inside ourselves that needs healing? When you're connecting with the animal, what is it that the animal needs right now? Let me see if I can, sense their resistance and maybe guide them into it and see if they're willing, to come back out. And then that tells their nervous system, like, oh, I'm okay here. I'm safe. Because a lot of times that's what we need. We need to know that we're safe and secure. So also when I teach somatics, that's what I create, an atmosphere of love. Everything grows in the soil of love, an atmosphere of love. And to know that you're safe and secure, then you're able to go into your physiology, into the areas where your mind has cut off. Because when there's trauma, we want to escape the body. We stay over just in here, right? We disconnect ourselves from where the trauma is. So somatics takes us into the physiology and addresses the trauma that's in the physiology, because we are a whole being. We are one organism, and we experience things as a whole. Same with the horses. So we need to address ourselves as a whole.
Yeah.
I find this fascinating. I'm in the middle, that the name of my ministry is Heart of the Tribe. And it's because for 2 decades, I've been studying what are the individual characteristics of the tribe? How does it work together? What does it mean for the entire body of Yeshua as the body, And so one of the things that right before I went to Medina, Ohio last June, so almost a year ago, right before I went, a few months before I went, Yah dropped it into my spirit that each of the tribes lined up with a particular body system. So when I first started hearing Teresa talk about the somatic nervous system, I mean, what started clicking with me, and this is what I've been trying to wrap my brain around with this, is the nervous system lines up with the tribe of Issachar, right? And so, and this is just what Yah has shown me, right? So as I've studied that out, one of the things that I know about the tribe of Issachar is it says in Chronicles that they are a tribe that knew times and seasons and had an understanding of those things and knew what Yasharel, as the entire body of Yasharel, should do. And so I was like,
I
that's
just got
fascinating.
goosebumps.
Yeah. It just
Wow.
blows me away.
I think we just ran into truth again.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just the different parts of our body, you've got the spine so connected to the nervous system. You've got the teeth that are so connected. You've got the feet. I mean, like our whole body from head to toe is so connected and intertwined with each other. And it's so cool. But then it's like, yeah, we really need to study this. We really need to study how we've been created. And it's not necessarily that you need to go get educated for a long time. You learn from people who have kind of gotten it, and you start to put the truth together. You learn how to discern what is true. And then it lines up and yeah, like I said, it's in us already because Yah designed us this way.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long to educate in it. It just takes seeking and time and discernment.
Yeah.
And playing it out, it's really cool. One thing I noticed specifically with me in somatics is that after session 4, I think around 4 or 5, I really started to feel a difference in how my body moved in the saddle and how I could accomplish the instruction that Pippa was telling me to do easier without resistance. Like it was like my brain knew how to activate different things, and it wasn't forced anymore. Like open your hip and turn, for different shoulder in moves and stuff. It's like I was just there, whereas before I was like, like open the hip, and sometimes I'd come and like put my hand down and like shove it open, and so that's really nice to kind of just be able to be like, okay.
That's interesting. I think I've had 5 sessions now with Teresa. And so the first 2, I was like, I don't know what we're doing. My brain just wasn't connected. I'm just going to do what she tells me to do, whether it makes sense to me or not.
Yeah.
But on session 3, I actually felt where a muscle was connecting at a start point and where it connected all the way, like crossing my body. And then I've noticed like I've been having trouble with an ankle. And I was telling Teresa about this on our last session. I was having trouble in my ankle, and I was like, oh, wait. And I was able to like get quiet and turn inward so that I could feel that muscle connection. And I was like, oh, that's connected to my hip flexor. If I can, work some with my hip flexor, I bet I could release that. And I did.
Yeah.
And then, then what I added was the knowledge of all the different things I've been working with oils. People don't always know this about me, but, Neetza and I are great friends, and she is a master, right? I love her. She is a master with the oils. And I'm a novice, but I am a certified aromatherapist, but on a novice level. But so I've been working with, understanding different things. Like I've been working on nervous system things with Issachar and making a blend that would help release different nervous conditions. So I'm adding that to what I'm learning about somatics, to what I'm learning through pathways with being able to, not run away from every emotion, but kind of go into it and experience it, knowing that I'm safe and that it's okay, and being able to release it. It's so much faster. It's so much healthier. It's so empowering, all of it together. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I have so many things going through my mind right now, but whew, settle down. Like bing, 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 bing. Oh goodness. Okay, what was it that I really wanted to to say? Gosh, I've lost it. It will come back.
It will.
Shell, you were talking about nervous system, the hips, the connectors, the trauma. It had to do with the trauma because I know we have talked about that. And so maybe while I'm regathering what it was that came before I had all of these like questions and ideas. Teresa, do you want to talk about how trauma works in the body, like your view on it? Because I'm actually really interested to hear your like kind of full trauma perspective of how we carry it and how we release it.
Yeah, I mean, trauma, there's the emotional, the psychological, all that stuff also ends up in those reflexive patterns. And the thing so there's, I guess I could talk about the three major reflexive patterns, because there's many reflexes. I think there's over like 50 reflexes in the body. So the red light reflex affects all the muscles in the front of the body, and that's the startle reflex. So that's in response to a threat when we're not feeling safe. So that that describes what your mare was going through, right? She was basically going into the startle reflex, into the red light reflex, because her shoulders were contracting inward like this, right? So instinctually, she was going into that trauma pattern. When she knew she was safe, when you were helping her out, she was able to come back to homeostasis. We can also develop that trauma pattern through habituated posture. So if we're sitting a lot, like either at a computer or we're driving, like I think of truck drivers or taxi drivers, Uber drivers, people that have to sit for long periods, they're actually creating that red light pattern and they're becoming stuck in it, but it's not necessarily due to something traumatic, but it's just due to the fact that the brain is just learning that habituated pattern because it's in it for so long. So what happens is, with trauma, if it's something from outside and it keeps getting triggered, those patterns get habituated. And when something gets habituated, they get stuck in the subconscious. The conscious mind is not focusing on that. So then I'll move on to the green light reflex. The green light reflex is all the muscles in the back of the body. It's the call to action reflex, your stand at attention reflex, if you want to think of it that way too. All the muscles in the back contract and you take action. You move forward to meet life's responsibilities. Or it's your flight reflex, right? To run. You have to straighten your back and run if there's a threat, right? So it's the flight reflexive pattern. And then we have the trauma reflex, which shows up on one side or the other visually as, kind of a contraction along the side of the body. But the trauma reflex could show up anywhere in the body. So, it's where I've done somatics with people and their face, half of it will just contract, or they've described it as it's frozen. Or they'll have like a muscle in their face start to release and twitch, which, and they'll ask me, but we're doing the movement here. How is it happening here? But because the trauma is just happening anywhere and everywhere in the body. When we're releasing along the reflexive patterns is the key, because when it's never one muscle, it's always a muscle pattern. When we have something tight or when we feel discomfort in the body or there's pain, and we kind of touch it. We go, oh, something here. It's not necessarily that muscle that's causing the pain. It could be coming from something along that muscle pattern. So while we're releasing the full body patterns, these other trauma, contracted trauma patterns that are going on in the body could be showing up. Yeah. So it's our physiological response when life, to life events, basically, whether it's psychological, whether it's emotional, whether it's spiritual, whether it's physical, social, all those five, those are the five aspects or pillars of health. It's like when any of those gets threatened, or any of those, if there's something that is what we interpret, it could be also, we talked about this in our last interview together, Shell, is the perception. When we perceive something as threatening or something as harmful, if we are interpreting it, that hurt me, our body's reacting to it. Yeah. There is a trauma response in the physiology. And when those, and then that's a thought pattern getting stuck, right? And when that thought pattern keeps repeating itself, the body goes along with the mind. We know that, right? So the spirit is the top of I always think of the hierarchical, it's where, the spirit, mind, body. So the body's in subjection to the mind is in subjection to the spirit. If the mind is toxic, the body will be toxic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I've thought about that a lot in patterns of the mind. It's like, say somebody, an incident happens and we're not able to do as Yah says and forgive and let go, right? And something becomes a resentment. The way that I've always pictured that is it's like, you just think about even the beginning of the word it's repeating, it's resentment, it's something that's going in a pattern, right? And so you're thinking about that, and just think about like a normal path that you walk. The more you walk that path, the harder compacted the ground's going to get, the deeper the entrenchment in the ground, right? And so that's like a real picture of something getting stuck. And it's harder to get back out of. You walk around it long enough, you've made a ditch that you need somebody to throw a rope into and get you back out.
Well, that's what's happening in the brain, right? So when a pattern becomes habituated, those motor or neuromuscular mapping in the mind are deep. It's like addiction, right?
Yeah.
Addictions are just deep mind mapping, deep motor pattern or mind patterns that have become habituated. So, and it's the same thing with the reflexive patterns or the trauma reflex. When trauma happens, if it becomes habituated, those grooves, you can think of like the rut you were talking about, right? The grooves in our mind become deeper. So when we learn somatics, what are we doing? We're not like the brain. You can't erase what the brain has learned, but we can teach the mind a healthy pattern, right? Yeah. How to release, lengthen, relax, how to get out of that trauma response back into homeostasis, back into a healthy response. That's what somatics does, is bring it it's that rope.
Yeah.
Right. Pulling you out of that rut and bringing you and creating new mind mapping patterns, right? New pattern in your mind that now becomes the default rather than the reflexive pattern. So Thomas Hanna described it as, we learn this, that the power of somatics is that we now, instead of the reflexes having power over you, we have the power to overcome those reflexes, recognize them, so we can, so-called have our cake and eat it too. We can live in a stressful world, but not have it live or reside in us. Like we have to be with trauma and with just living in the world, we're constantly going to have trauma. But think of your body as a stream of water running through different terrains and seasons and all that kind of stuff. And as it has to be able to adapt, and it has to be able to adjust, right? It's adapting, it's adjusting, and we're changing, but we're still maintaining movement. And that's what, so when any trauma in the body is this congestion of energy, and it's very powerful. Like you said, Shell, when you can't forgive, when there's bitterness, when someone has wronged you, and you're holding on to that, it's like a buildup of energy in the body that is not being discharged.
Yeah.
Somatics allows us to get in those areas and feel ourselves through the felt sense and gain that conscious awareness and gain that freedom in the physiology, because a lot of the focus in somatics is movement freedom, right?
Yeah.
We want to have freedom, and the only way we can move freely is if we can discharge those energies that keep congesting our muscles or keep congesting us in the physiology. Those have to get discharged in order to be free and move freely.
I have this picture in my mind, Teresa, as you were talking about the stream. At first I was thinking, oh yeah, the stream, it can just run out, right? But then I was like, wait a second, no, that doesn't really work. So I was thinking about like mem and water and how water holds memory, and we have the stream. And so I was thinking like, when the congestion happens, the water would be stagnant. And what happens with stagnant water over time? It gets yucky, right? Yeah. And so, as you start to, the other thing is that water holds memory. So like, yes, your body's going to hold the memory of everything. You can't just let it run out and like it's gone down the stream, but you can re-imprint it. So as the trauma happens, it's like, ooh, trauma happened. Then from there, you can take it and, from properly like addressing it in the moment, working through it, you're telling the body, I'm re-imprinting this, or I'm spending more time imprinting this resolution, this healing, this resolve. That includes the forgiveness and, being able to handle the hurt and address the hurt. And then now I've got this clear stream and the congestion's not there, and it's, it's okay. The memory's still there. But like my stream's clean, it's cycling, there's no congestion, so I got a really cool picture of all of that. And the trenches, I had to laugh at that because I was like, yeah, Kim totally threw me a rope like a year ago. Like, thanks, Kim, like now I feel like, we were able to get in there and kind of like break down the trench and stuff. But yeah, that's like a real thing. But then, like, praise Yah, there are people out there that can throw out the rope, because I feel like most of us, or I can speak for myself and people that are around me, it's been so long that we haven't had tools, or we haven't had anybody who knew how to throw the rope, or we haven't known that we needed a rope, that finally when we do, it's like I'm just so grateful that there are people that can do that and help pull us out and rebuild.
Yeah. I was really thinking about that, when we're talking about the forgiveness thing, because when, say, betrayal hits and you've got a psychological trauma, that's happened, right? And yet, you immediately go to the word, and the word says, well, I've got to forgive. And my feelings don't line up with that at all. Right. So then you can easily, going along a lot of religious training that I've had in the past, I could easily skip right into shame. Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm such a bad person because I don't feel forgiveness in this moment, rather than taking the time to accept the fact that, I really feel this way. I'm feeling these things, and work with someone who's throwing us a rope. who says, yeah, I know that you're feeling that way, and your feelings are valid, but do you want to live there? Or can we wash some things with a different perspective and look at it in a different way so that you can easily come up out of it and not have to remain stuck in it? And that's the value that I'm seeing with the work that I've done with Kim and Davey. It's really helped me with that tremendously.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, being able to recognize it there in the moment. And I like the way you said, like, can we look at this in a different way? Because we're dealing with other hurt people. That's the only people hurting us are other people, and we're all hurt, So it's like being able to step and really, like, this is what's helped me so much is look at where they might be coming from. And it's not just like put yourself in their shoes, because, sometimes they do really hurtful, but when you can dig deeper in that and be like, oh, they're feeling a really strong emotion they don't know what to do with. And so they ran into protection mode and I got the brunt of it. That's what happened there rather than whatever happened is actually true. And this is where Janet Miller helped me. She's, part of took the ATP class with me and does coaching. She's my coach also in this. Anyway, she's like, at that point, you have a choice to believe the truth, Yah's way, or to believe the lie that was presented to you. And I struggled with that. And I challenged her on that a little bit because I'm like, yeah, but Janet, like, I didn't know way back then that that was a lie, because somebody told me this really hurtful thing about myself and I really cared about them. And I, like, I didn't even know there was a choice. And like, so I'm like, are you sure? Like, how does this work? Anyway, but I got the opportunity to really see that at the clinic when I was there. And so finally I was like, okay, Janet, you're right. But what it came down to is now I see that, they talk about like you can't avoid shame, you just get shame resilient, which I think is true. But I also think that you can help maybe mitigate or modulate it or something, right? So like somebody says something really hurtful to me, and this isn't always possible, but when it is, say, wow, that really hurt. Did you mean that? Or was that out of anger because, you're upset that something else happened? Like sometimes addressing it right then allows them to like reveal the truth to you, right? You're discerning, like, is that true? Or did you just say that because of this? And I think most of the time they can say, oh, yeah, you're right. I didn't mean that. I'm just really upset because da, 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 da. And then all of a sudden it's not a hard choice to make at that point because you've just worked through it right then and there. Yeah. So I never really allowed the opportunity to go into shame because I never took it. I held it in the open and said, wait a second, what is it? Let's weigh it out. I think you can do it even without the person there, or even if they said, yes, I did mean it. Then usually at that point you can be like, I see you're really angry. I think that I'm going to believe that thing and maybe we can talk about this later, So even it doesn't really necessarily matter what their response is, although I think usually it's helping them as well as yourself, making this decision of what you're going to believe. Either way, you can kind of navigate around shame or just, pass it. Like you're never holding on to it enough to even have to be resilient for it. Like if you're resilient, that means that you've grabbed onto it, and so if you can like hold it in the air before it gets there, I'm thinking like, wouldn't that be the ideal? Not that you're always going to be able to do that. And then that's when the resilience comes in. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of just something that I've been like contemplating and seeing. But there's this choice aspect. What are you going to believe? Yeah. Where are you going to go with this? And when you can do that and you can start to sort through these things, feel the emotions, recognize the hurt, it's so much easier for me to forgive somebody and truly forgive and truly be able to move on. Because before it was always forced, and a forced forgiveness isn't really going to do much. Mm-mm. Like you're still holding it. It's still there. The emotion, the hurt, everything's still there. So yeah. I think we've got to learn to work it out and, really push into it, get into the trenches, Yeah. Get into the hurt.
Yeah.
The resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go with the resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Teresa, did you have any more thoughts on that, or did you guys have um, any other experiences that you wanted to delve into?
Well, Nicole is doing some personal training now. So
Cool.
some exercises. She's making some progress there with her hamstrings. And oh, I wonder if you wanted to share about the other horse that had the tight hamstring.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
I'd actually love, I don't know how long you want to run, Shell.
I'm good. We'll just let's let it take its natural course, and unless or either of you on a time frame that we need to be conscious of.
I probably have about 30 minutes max would be
Okay.
mine.
Okay.
How are you, Teresa?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. So there's one story. I think I can tie it all together and hopefully not take up too much time, but it goes along with all we're saying, including the hamstrings. So I'm going to come to the hamstrings at the end, though, Teresa, so don't let me forget.
Okay.
Okay, so at the clinic with Pippa, which is like maybe a month ago now, she rode my horse the first day, and Rocky, who has the tight hamstrings, that's kind of who I rode for the weekend or the week. Anyway, and she, could really pull a lot of fire out of Rocky. And I'm like, gosh, Pippa, please don't get backed off. Because she's just like jazzing her up. But, like, it's not a cowboy way. It's so quiet. And like, Pippa's just very quiet in there, yet she's bringing out like this fire in my mare. And I'm like, like, don't go too far. But no, anyway, she knows what she's doing. But we were at dinner that night. And I know with this competition dream that I have, that, I've got to get that fire back out. I'm like, I used to be able to run with it. And like, I would watch old runs. And after it, I would question, like, I don't know if I can ever run that fast again. Because like the fire was so far gone or distant from me. I just felt like I don't even know that it's there, that I can ever pull it back out. Anyway, so I kind of shared this with Pippa over dinner. And I was like, I need you to help me get that fire back. So she's okay. So the next day we go out, and this was with the whole group. And so we switched arenas, and the only mare I have that hasn't had a traumatic weaning is the only one that doesn't mind leaving her herd. She doesn't care. It's fine. All my other horses, because we didn't know any better at the time, had time to wean. Mom goes by. Like, that's it, and it's super traumatic. So they get this separation anxiety, and people want to point to behavior, but it's not. It's trauma. Anyway, so I take her across the pasture and into the other arena where she can't really see her herd. And she is just beside herself. After I do this a few times, and stuff, because this always happens every season where I transition arenas, she gets okay with it, but it doesn't happen in a day. So we're in there and we kind of work with her on the ground. Pippa says, okay, go ahead and get on. So I try and get on, and Rocky's dancing all over. Like, I can't get on, but I'm like determined I'm going to get on. And Pippa starts talking in my ear because we have a little speaker. She's like, yeah, the only time I've almost gotten hurt at clinics is when I try and get a horse that won't let me on them. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Yeah. So all this to say is what happened. Let me cut to the chase. So I was in this position where my horse was completely out of her mind, right? Like, or out of her body, I should say. Like, she's so worried about the herd over there. There's nothing really here. I had this experience a year and a half ago at the same clinic. It was my very first clinic, very first ride with Pippa on her sister, Shasta, who has extreme separation anxiety. And kind of the same thing happened. They're like, you shouldn't get on. And it was like crushing to me. You have shame. I'm unworthy. I'm not good enough. My horse should be better than this. Like, I'm terrible at my horses. I should be, a better trainer or friend, owner. I should be able to get my horse's trust and attention. You know, all of these things flooded me at that clinic. Well, here I am a year and a half later, first clinic ride on her sister, and it's like the same experience. I want to get on, I can't get on. Like, they want me to work from the ground. I have confidence issues with groundwork. You know, I didn't grow up in it. When I got trained in it, it was in a way that really just, I felt shame in the training. So that drove my confidence down even more. So I would rather be on a horse than risk my safety than be on the ground and try and work with them. Like, you know, that's where I was coming from. So anyway, all this goes on. Somebody kind of stepped in and was working with my horse and doing a good job and stuff. And I was like, you know, glad I didn't have to do it. And Pippa sends me out, why don't you start and, you know, work with her on this? So I'm like, okay. And I go out there and finally I realize I am so out of my own body right now. I can't even think about trying to do groundwork with my mare. It's like just not like I can't help her. I'm a mess. So I stopped and I was a distance away. Again, we have little ear things, you know, Pippa and I, so that we can hear each other across distance. So my back is to her and I just stopped working with Rocky, and Rocky kind of stood and I'm like, okay. And she's like, how would you do this? And I said, I can't right now. I got to help myself first. She goes, oh, okay. So I'm like asking myself, I'm like, how old am I? 16. Like I just knew 16. And I thought, that's weird. I would have thought I would have been younger, like 6, 4, you know, these traumas happen. But for some reason I said 16. So I work through this and what am I hearing? What am I yelling at myself? Your horse should be better than this. You should be better than this. You know, da, 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 da. So Pippa, you know, talks to me again. How's it going? I said, oh, you know, fine. And she goes, okay. I said, well, Nicole's 16 right now. And she goes, okay. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like kind of yelling at me. And she goes, well, it's 16-year-old Nicole saying, you know, not good enough. Da, 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 da. Tell her the whole list. She goes, whoa, she's judgmental. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but she's also really hurt. And I'm trying to talk through the hurt, you know? And anyway, so we kind of do a few more things and finally I leave and I just know I need to just go and figure this out because there's a very hurt person inside right now that needs to come out. So I go back, put my horse up, sit down in the pasture, cry a while, and then start talking through like, okay, where is this coming from? And I figure out exactly where it comes from. Okay, I had an experience when I was 16. I had really bad barrel runs. Somebody important in my life told me I messed up every horse I rode, you know, out of anger and like probably out of shame in itself. I don't know. But, you know, it wasn't true. But at that point, I didn't realize the choice or the discernment. I just got hit really hard. And I took that belief, you know, and I didn't even know I took that belief. But here I am almost 16 years later. And that girl, when that happens and I feel totally inadequate or like I should, you know, just comes back out. I'm 16 again. So I worked through that a bit myself and even the other person just to kind of like, you know, do that. And it was amazing because the other person knew like without any hardly detail, knew exactly what I was talking about. But they remembered the part that triggered them. They didn't remember the response to me. So really interesting how that all worked out. They're like, oh, yeah, because this happened. And I was like, wait, what? I didn't remember that. And they're like, well, I don't remember saying that to you. It's like, oh. So anyway, I talked with Janet for quite a while after that as well. Janet Miller was there. And what we kind of got down to is that I didn't trust myself or that I had the skill or the ability or anything anymore. Mm-hmm. So I went back that afternoon and rode. Rocky was still fired up, but I'm like, okay, Pippa, like, let's just get on and like, you know, try and work through it. She's like, good. So I got on and she said, you know, Nicole, maybe this is our gift. She said, you wanted the fire last night. And she said, and your horse has fire. she goes, so this is totally out of order, but let's lean into this. Let's take advantage. And so I said, okay. So she started to instruct me in a move called the pee off. And the pee off is when the horse marches in place, but you bring up such a strong emotion in their body. And then they have to be like relaxed and confident in that. Okay. You bring up too emotion, they can't do it. It's scattered, you know. So we start working on this pee off. I've never done it before. I don't really know a lot about it. I hardly have seen it. She's kind of coaching me through it. And I start to feel it a little bit. But as soon as we'd go into it, her motor would like shut down. And so I about said, Pippa, how do I, crank up the gas? Like, how do I, she's slowing down. How do I fix this? And then all of a sudden in the mid-sentence, I said, wait, never mind. And I was like, I think I know how. And so I went and I did it. And like, a couple more tries. And all of a sudden we just went whoosh into this grand, big pee off. And like, everybody was like, whoa, and I came around and I started bawling. I don't do that. I had no control over it. I just was sobbing and saying, thank you so much, Pippa. I can do it. It was like that full circle of, I do have it in me. I do know I can do this. And it was like, you can't give me fire. You can't train fire in me. I had to relearn the truth that I have it in me so that I could access that fire again. So until I dealt with that trauma and that emotion, it was too far away. I wouldn't have been able to grab it. So like, Yah is so good. And after that, Pippa came up and we were just talking. She's like, he heard you. Like, he heard you. She's like, this is what you asked for last night. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. It was like, I was such an emotional, like, exhaustion and wreck that it really took her pointing this out. And I'm like, wow, you're right. So that was that story. Now with Rocky and her hamstrings, they're pretty much her whole life has been known to be very tight. And her stifles were considered loose. And what's interesting is that mine are exactly the same. I've like never been able to touch my toes. I couldn't even like sit on the floor like that. It would like hurt. I'd have to prop myself up and lean back a little bit. Like, I mean, I'm talking like pretty extreme tight hamstrings. And, we found out all of a sudden, like, she started having me do exercises to not only lengthen them, but to strengthen my glutes. And I'm like, whoa, this is the same as with my horse. And so now I'm really excited because it's giving me extra ideas on how to strengthen her glutes so that she can kind of help balance out the hamstring. It's just a whole new dynamic. And I mean, gosh, we've known this about her for years and nobody has been able to really offer any advice besides going up and down hills, which made it worse for her.
Well, you also mentioned that you released her hamstring. You did an assisted pendiculation with her hamstring.
Yes, we did. Yep.
And then so there was so lengthened.
Yes, that's what you're talking. Okay. Yeah. The first time I played with it, this is before I even knew a lot of this stuff, but I just thought, I'll play around with this. It was at the end of our ride, so I'd just ridden her a bunch. And so I did a little bit. I walked her straight back to the pasture. And all of a sudden I heard behind me, click, click, click. And I'm like, so I like stopped and like turned around and I walked again. Her hamstrings had released so much. She was clipping her front hooves with her back hooves. Clip, clip, clip. And I'm like, whoa. I just ridden her. I walk her all the time. She doesn't clip her heels. So that was really rare. And then I realized, okay, now it's time that I need to release her shoulders because her front feet need to get out of the way for her new reach of her hind legs. So I've been working on her shoulders a lot, and that's where she's tight right here. And like if I pull, this down, she'll just collapse. I mean, it's so sore in there, but I think it's because she's been compensating for her hind end for so long, which I'm also tight there. Like, that's what I was just telling you this morning during our session. How do I release this? You know, I don't know if I can have the horse do the flower, but anyway, so thanks for letting me share that. That's just like a praise to Yah and a testimony that's so near and dear, because it was, you know, really life-changing in a lot of ways for me to see that full circle process in one day.
That was an amazing story, Nicole. I know that you're talking about the stuff that you're doing with your horse, but this transcends, you know, this hits people everywhere, no matter what, because you're talking about, you know, dealing with and releasing, you know, past traumas and being okay with that, being authentic enough to say, I'm dealing with 16-year-old Nicole right now. You know, I mean, what freedom to be able to do that, you know, to own it and go ahead, and instead of letting it, you know, come out in a sideways motion of getting mad at somebody else and them having no idea why, right?
And they have trauma.
Right. It's just like this perpetuating cycle, but how freeing when we can be authentic enough and safe enough to be able to say, this is okay. I have the tools to deal with this. I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to do what's necessary for healing to be able to take place so that I can release it. And it's no longer a hindrance in my life, but then I can move on to the next thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge.
Totally. Yeah. And, you know, Pippa was a safe place to do that with. I knew I could. So yeah, what was interesting is after that, like, pee off and that release I had, I was walking Rocky. I think we played with it a little bit more, but, you know, she had definitely like simmered down a little bit. And at the end, I could feel that I was holding tightness in my knees because, you know, like, she was a little bit fiery. I was like kind of on the edge of like, I could get dismounted here, you know? So anyway, felt the tension in my knees. I was like trying to do the somatics thing to like, how can I release this? And finally I was like, I've got to let go of my stirrups, which those were the things saving me. Right. But I knew I wasn't going to release the tension in my knee unless I did that. So I did that, released the tension in my knee, and she completely went,
Amazing.
You know, loose rein, head down. Okay, you can get off now. Like, lesson done. But, you know, I don't even think I would have noticed that I was holding tension in my knee without somatics.
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't have even occurred to me there. So anyway, just
yeah. I know, Teresa, you've got, you know, such an amazing testimony yourself and all the different things that you've learned how, you know, to release and how you got through, you know, your difficult, you know, experience. Do you want to share kind of as we wrap up here a little bit to kind of wrap up all that we've been talking about here?
What would you like me to share? I don't want to be talking here for too long.
Yeah. Just kind of, you know, your thoughts, you know, how you see the principles of all this coming into place, how it's, you know, things that high level stuff that you've learned, you know, drop us a few nuggets of truth here before we wrap up.
Yeah, for sure. So I have to say, on my own journey, that self-awareness and going back to what Nicole just finished talking about, you know, and as she just said, you know, I don't think I would have known this if I hadn't done somatics, or I wouldn't have been aware. It's that willingness to do the education, to learn, right? And I find I come up against a lot of resistance because it is an education and it takes time. And our culture, we've been trained to look for quick fixes, right? Just take that pill and you'll feel better, or just, do that one thing and you'll be fine. And it's like, no, go inside, figure out, because we know what we need. The biggest thing that somatics has also taught me, because I see it as not only a missing link in movement, but it's a missing link in healthcare. Because if we are our best physician, so to speak, because to the degree we know ourselves is to the degree we can relay or to express, what is our symptoms, what are our signs, what's going on inside. If we don't have that awareness, we can't become key players in our healthcare. We can't tell others, because doctors, they don't know you as well as you do. So I always say, there's no better person to empower than you, because you care most about your health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why this education is so empowering. And when I learned it, I just grabbed onto it. I'm like, I need to know this. I need to learn this, because we do the work on the floor, but all of the education, it filters out into your life's activities and your life's, how you're living your life, into your lifestyle. Because like Nicole said, well, I wasn't aware. Awareness comes before transformation. We don't know what we don't know, and we can't change what we don't know we need to change. How do we bring that into an area where we can recognize it needs change? Well, we need to be aware of it. And how do we bring about a sense of awareness? Is taking that time to be quiet and to recognize what's going on within us. And that's, in our kind of area, our culture, within Yeshua, is we have our quiet time. A lot of people in the world don't have quiet time, right? And what I see somatics is that quiet time, but it's like, it's a movement meditation with purpose. It has you focusing on going into using your felt sense, which is gathering. What is the felt sense? It's gathering all of that sensory information and making sense of it, bringing it to an area where we can recognize, okay, I sense this. Oh, there's this. And it's a bunch of different information coming from all over the body, but your mind is able to sense it from all different directions. And when we use that, then we have this greater sense of awareness within ourselves. And when we do, we become just overall better human beings. Yeah. Because the degree that we know ourselves, we can help others, and we can also I always describe it as, that the calming effect that somatics has as well. We are able to respond in a calmer manner. If we're full of trauma, if we're full of unrest, and we're constantly stressed and tense, and you can see it, you can feel it in people that are, we tend to just blurt out things, or we become easily irritable, and we can't give a good answer. We can't answer in a calm and relaxed way. So I always like to tell my student, if you're relaxed, if your body is completely relaxed, you can respond in a relaxed, calm manner. Yeah. Something that wouldn't bother you, at another time may bother you if you're all tensed up and you would blow up, right? Mm-hmm. It's that, I always, it's the congested energy. It's this powerful stuckness that when we don't release and relax, and when we don't discharge it, it blows up. And that's what we do in our emotions. Get away from me. I don't want to know. I don't want to talk to you. It's this, because we haven't discharged. We haven't dealt with whatever it is that's blocking us. You know, in Nicole's case, it was that 16-year-old, it was that it was the lie, false belief, right? And so the power of this is we gain or we cultivate a self-awareness that we take on into our walk in life. And in that, we become powerful, because we now have the tools whenever we get put out into those reflexive patterns, because we will, as long as we're alive, there will constantly be things we need to respond to, and we'll constantly have trauma. But this gives us the tools to know what to do to get freedom.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's such great advice there. You know, two more of the words came back to me. It's the difference between being responsible, which means I have the ability to respond, or being reactive, which means, you know, it's just gonna blow up.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. You know, and I think I can plug this in real quick. You know, the whole repeating lessons, you know, I had a repeat lesson because I was like, oh my gosh, this happened to me a year and a half ago, almost identical. But this time I passed the test.
Yeah.
And if I wouldn't have had that first lesson where I wasn't even ready for it, I had just found out about ATB and was I was scheduled to go to class. Like, I mean, I was a baby of my journey. So he like gave me the test, so that way I could look back in this year and a half and say, I passed. You know, he gave it to me again and I was ready for it. So it's like that, you know, that repeating lesson, that going around the trench, like you're probably going to get a repeat lesson because he's really gracious to show us how far we've been. Just make sure that you don't get like multiple where you need the rope, you know?
That's what I say. As you know, if you keep getting the same thing happening over and over again, you haven't learned the lesson.
Yeah.
Like one more trip around the mountain.
Yeah.
And one other plug, I just wanted to say, I won't go into it, but if people want to look up Isaiah 58, the Father talks about healing there. And I think the whole going into resistance is like shown in there, and the soul affliction. And he says that then your healing will be brought forth speedily. You'll be loose from the chains. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially he's basically saying like, you've got to go down into the depths and afflict your soul. Yeah. And then your healing will spring forth.
Right.
You will be free. And I think that's what personally where I'm at right now, I think like that's what Yom Kippur is for and stuff. I think that's what soul afflicting is. You're setting aside a time to go into those places where you don't want to go, so that you can be healed when you come out of it and be ready for Sukkot. Because how else can you celebrate Sukkot and be joyful, you know? Yeah. Anyway,
that's awesome. It goes in kind of something that my husband and I do always on Yom Teruah. We always, and I know this is a Jewish tradition, but it's one that we have adopted that we really love, and we've made it our own. And we take that time during Yom Teruah to say, Yahweh, there's something specific that we need to be paying attention to, that's a shortcoming in our life, in our walk, something that's tripping us up. You know, would you speak a word to us? And we'll spend time separately in prayer asking for that. And we will take a rock and we will write that word on a rock. And then we go down to a living body of water and we cast it in and we quote, you know, I believe it's in Micah. I can't remember right now whether it's Micah or Malachi, but it talks about how we cast all of our sins into the sea. You know, and we just ask him in this next year, help us to overcome that, help us to come up higher in that area. So I think that kind of goes in line with that. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
This has been such a good discussion interview. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I thank you both for coming and sharing your hearts and sharing your lives and just being your authentic selves. This hit for me on so many levels of coming up higher. of overcoming, that I just really appreciated. I got a lot out of it. I know anybody else who's watching and listening, with an ear to listen will get a lot out of it. But I personally got a lot out of the discussion, and I appreciate y'all taking the time to do it.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you for letting us have this discussion. I can do this all day.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. All right, so I've got both websites on. Please look at the description, like the video, share the video. It'll help the algorithms to get out, and definitely take some classes with Teresa. Go visit Nicole's website, read her blog. It's fascinating. To me, your blog also just hits on a lot of different levels. I mean, I know you're writing from your viewpoint, but I don't know anything about horses, and I can get a whole lot out of what you have to share.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's why I kind of changed the title to Journey to Wholeness, because it's through the horses that the Father's taking me on this journey, but it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right. Well, with that, and anything else that anybody that you guys wanted to share before we say goodbye?
I think we're good.
Okay. Well, with that, we're going to say shalom. Shalom, everyone. Thanks for joining us.